configure server, how to configure the client, how to configure the workstation, and how to bootstrap a node, how to create a run list, and how to generate a cookbook, how to execute from the client, right? So any questions from that? So yesterday we have also seen how to create a role, how to group the servers based on the roles and environments, how to restrict a cookbook running with a specific version for an environment. Right? Any questions from this? So we have also tried chef search, that is actually knife search. Instead of executing the cookbook, we can actually, if you want to execute a small command, instead of writing a cookbook, we can do that using knife search. Right? To execute commands remotely. Right? And knife search is like chef by default maintains an inventory. Right? So we can search, extract the details from the inventory using knife search. It internally uses something called a high profiler. Actually maintains information about all the clients. So there are also some other components of Chef, something like PostgreSQL. Okay, RabbitMQ. Then high profiler. These are some of the services of Chef, right? So internally it uses a database called PostgreSQL, and it uses a service called RabbitMQ. RabbitMQ is something like it's a component that's the kind of interface between the two machines. If a machine sends the messages to another machine, it will form a queue of all the messages and it will try to execute one by one. Anybody tried creating such environment locally? So there is also something called Chef Supermarket. Okay. So using which this is a kind of repository of all the cookbooks. You can search for a particular requirement in the cookbook and download that cookbook. And we can use directly that cookbook. So first we download the cookbook from Supermarket, and then once we download it, we have to upload the cookbook to server. Once it is uploaded, then we need to create a run list. Once a run list is created, we can execute chef client from the end client that will pick up this cookbook and execute it. Right? Okay. So before this comes up, okay, I logged into the machine in the server. Okay, so this is my client and this is my development kit. So let me try now node list. So this should give me the list of nodes. Let me see if I'm able to access the chef server from the calendar interface. By default, the chef manages nodes up to 25. to 25 nodes, open source version of Chef. So if we want more than 25 nodes, we need to go for the Chef Enterprise Edition. Chef can be implemented in different ways. So what are the ways Chef can be implemented? Let us say there is a new organization and we want to use Chef for the infrastructure management. So how do we create Chef in different ways? What are the different ways we can create Chef environment, Chef ecosystem? Anyone?
Different ways mean, I don't know, like, what do you mean by that?
So, client server model.
Yeah, so one is we have the conventional model wherein we have all three components internally defined, and we have Chef server, Chef client,
Oh,
and
yeah. Okay, we can have a cloud Chef server also, right?
have hosted Chef, and we can have
Cloud Chef.
So these are the ways which we can implement Chef.
In terms of cloud hosted, Santosh, is it going to be all three servers in the cloud? The client will be for you, client and workstation may be on your local, and cloud Chef server would be on the cloud, right? Something like that?
Exactly. Server will be on the cloud, workstation, and the clients will be locally.
Okay. Is it that cloud services Chef is offering by Amazon also? Amazon provide those services, or only Chef has own cloud?
Chef provides actually.
Okay.
So I'm not able to show too many things because of the resource issues. This graphical user interface, if this is there, we can see a lot of things. Like the version of the cookbook, you can see here itself. The content also will be shown here, and whatever is the cookbook content, something like index.html, the image files, everything we can see on the graphical user interface itself, right? And by dragging and dropping in the run list, we can associate each node with the cookbook, and we can associate a role with the cookbook. So everything we can do with the graphical user interface as well. We can create the environments from the graphical user interface. This is how we create the role, knife role from file and some file, and this file will create a role. So this file will be something like this. Role name is web server, and it has a attribute called recipe. So this attribute is basically we are associating this recipe. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, is there a way like Chef Cloud is available for testing purposes? Like we can access yeah, can you hear me, Santosh? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was, is there, yeah, do you think is the Chef Cloud,
Go ahead.
Yeah, Chef Cloud is available for testing purposes, like for, I was thinking if there any pre-configured Chef where we can implement and test everything just for sake of testing.
Yeah. So that we can do that using Chef Solar as well. So if we have Chef Apply also, we can use it something like in a single machine. If we have a single machine, we can, if just for executing the cookbooks, we can use Chef Apply, right? So let us say this is my client. there's something called chef apply command on the client. So this is when I want to execute the cookbook directly on the client, over the client, right? So instead of uploading it to server and instead of creating the run list and all the stuff, what we can do is we can directly execute a particular cookbook on the chef client itself. Okay, we'll try that. But even this is also taking time, but that's okay. Okay, so let us create a cookbook. Let us say I want to create a user using a sample cookbook and I want to assign a password to it and the user ID, group ID, let us say we create using chef client. So how do we create a cookbook? Let us say I start creating a cookbook, create user. So the resource name is user and the name of the user. Let us say user 1234. And what is the next thing? Do and end block. So we write everything in between the do and end block. And what are the user attributes? Right? What are the things the user can have?
User ID, group ID,
So user ID, I would say
home directory, password.
Group ID, I would say 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then home directory. So this machine is very slow because of this thing, so I'm not able to type properly. Anyway, we'll see. So home directory, I want it to be /home user 1234. Okay, and then I want to give shell. What is the shell?
Bin bash.
Bin bash. Okay. Then I want to give password. So what is the password? How do we give the password?
Encrypted?
How do we? Yeah, so encrypted password we need to give. So how do we generate the encrypted password for a particular user?
SSL, using SSL.
Okay, so OpenSSL will generate a password, right? First we have to generate a password, then we need to give the password here, right? So OpenSSL, what is that? OpenSSL, one password, right? Then I come in, OpenSSL -1, OpenSSL -password. Is it just OpenSSL password? It's OpenSSL password. Give them password. We would want to create something, and it will generate a password for us, right? And this password we can use inside the cookbook. So I'll give here. Okay, and this I have given the password. Anything else you want to give? So we have created a user ID, group ID, home directory, shell, password. So by default, will this create the home directory? So by default, will this create the home directory, or we need to give some other flag that will actually create the home directory for this particular user?
I think it should, right?
It will create by default one of the directories.
Okay.
But even if you don't mention, I think it will create in a directory.
I don't know. Normal Unix command generates the home directory,
See, in
but
Ansible also we use one flag that will actually create the home directory. By default, it was not creating the home directory, so we used a flag that will create the home directory. Right? Okay. Anyway, we'll see the chef documentation. Chef documentation, create user. So docs.chef will be the document. Then we'll have a lot of attributes for everything. So let us take one of the document and see how to generate the user. Okay, comment, UID, GID, home, shell, password, so more or less whatever we have given. So here there is something called, if you see, manage underscore home. You remember this? We have done this in Ansible as well. Right? So this is the attribute which decides whether we want to create the home directory or not. If we have this manage home is equal to true, then actually it will create the home directory. Otherwise, by default, it will not create the home directory. Okay? I'll show you some example as well.
Okay.
Manage home is equal to true. So this is what we need to give if we want to create a home directory. Okay. So manage underscore home. Okay. So since these are all the values, we have given the commas. So this is directly the value true. So we can directly give this value as true. Okay. So let me try to create the user. So now I have not created the cookbook using chef generate cookbook, and it did not create the directory structure. It is directly creating on the client just to let us say test. So I don't want to execute this cookbook on all the machines. I just want to execute on one particular machine on the client, right? So I directly return the cookbook. I directly written the cookbook on the client, and I'm just trying to execute it. And this is written in JSON format and resource type. And in between, we have written some code in do and end. So to create this user, first we need to make sure that there is a group exists, right? With some group ID. So let me create a group called group 1234. Okay. And let me see what is the GID of that group by default. etc group is the group where groups are present. So group ID is 1001. So let me include that group ID here. So group ID is 1000 and user 123 has to be added to that group ID. Okay.
Santosh,
So,
in the same cookbook, can we add a group creation also, right?
yeah, we can add. We can also add cookbook, and we can also say include underscore recipe. Okay. First, let us try to execute this. So we have a group ID created. Now I want to create a user called user123. So let me see if user123 is already present in etc password. No, it is not present. There is no user 1234 in etc password, which is a file which has the users. Right. Now let me try chef apply. So there is a syntax -o or something to execute it. Chef apply. Okay, so this way we can directly execute chef apply and then the name of the cookbook. So here in this case, even if I have a complete cookbook, we can use it, file recipes defaulted RB from where the execution starts, or we can execute a single cookbook as well, right? So since I don't have any directory structure, I'm giving chef apply create user. So let us it will create a after.
And just to recap, Santosh, on that client, chef client, we have configured the chef client only, right? The chef client that we have done previously,
Yeah,
right?
now we don't have anything. Just to execute it, we installed a chef client on chef client. Let us assume we don't have anything. So we only have one client, and on the client, chef client is installed.
Okay. So just if you have chef client installed, you can run those chef cookbooks, right, on that particular client.
Right.
Okay. We don't have
Okay,
to
it
install
says,
anything else, right? Okay.
yeah, it says user ID is undefined. What is this? Okay, it's UID, not user ID. UID, GID, save it. So as per the documentation, it's UID, not the user ID. So I changed it to UID, GID, home directory, manage me, password, shell. So these are the default properties for creating a user. What is that? Other directory, home, what is here? Home, it's only home. Okay, some syntax issues. Okay, anything else wrong? Password, shell, home, GAD. Okay, so it's the same. Now it should work. Okay, so it created a user. So that it also sets. Right? Now we have seen what is the disadvantages by using this model. Directly executed the cookbook. Then now all the chef clients I can create a cookbook and execute it this way. So what is the disadvantages you are seeing with this approach?
You have to add this file to every client, right?
Yeah, that is one way. So if you observe here, there is nothing like metadata.rb. What is metadata.rb?
The data for data.
Yeah. So why do we use metadata.rb in Chef?
Oh, for tracking the changes, right?
Right. So there is something called version in the metadata.rb that we can maintain. So here we are directly using the cookbook. So if we want to store the cookbooks in a proper order, if we want to have a proper directory structure, if we want to have the variables defined inside the other files, that we cannot do because this is a direct cookbook. So if we have a cookbook defined properly, generated using the knife method, and if we have stored it in Ansible etc. So root chef report books, and if we create a book called create user create user, so there will be different directories created, and also we can maintain the versions, right? So we can also change the cookbook, and we can still monitor the version. We can track the version with different by changing the metadata.rb. So that option is not there if we directly execute on the client, right? Do. And what are the properties of group? GID,
Santosh, you call this a cookbook or is a JSON file format?
Yeah, this is JSON. This is a cookbook which is in JSON format. Cookbooks we write in JSON format.
Okay, JSON format. Okay.
Yeah. What else we can have for a group? Group ID, group name, right? And okay. Now this group I want to create, but this group has to be created from a create user cookbook, right? So I have two files now. One is create user, one is the create group. Now from create user, I want to call this cookbook, right? I'll modify this as user 111. I want to create a new user called 111, but before creating the user, I want to create the group. So I'll give UID as something and GID as 111. What did we give? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So what I'm trying to do is I want to create a user and I want to create a group as well. And this user has to be added to that particular group. First we create the group, then we create the user. Okay. So what is the command to include one cookbook in another cookbook? It is include underscore recipe create group, right? Include underscore recipe. Is this right? Let me see the syntax. Include underscore recipe. Yeah.
Don't we have to give the complete path, like where is the recipe is stored, or?
So ideally, this is in the current directory, so we don't have to give the path. But if this is executed in a workstation, we don't even have to give path because all the cookbooks are stored in a particular path in the server, in the workstation, right? So so even if we execute a cookbook anywhere, it will execute because it knows the path. That path is mentioned in knife.rb file.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
but we haven't created RB file here, right?
So here, since we are in the same directory, there are two files in the same directory, so we can execute it. It will find in the same directory, right? So let us create
Is there any like preferred directory, or you can create any directory and just keep those files?
So see, this is not actually the right way, right? We are just using for testing.
Okay, yes. Yeah.
Here we write all the cookbooks, create user, create group, execute a command, all that stuff we write here, right? Okay. So I'm calling another cookbook create group. That create group should create a group with the GID. Sorry, create a group. With a group ID. I'll become very slow. Create group. They should create a group ID with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the group name is group 111. And then after this group is created, you should create a user with the name user 111, and this user has to be added to this group, right? Because I have given the same GID, right? Okay, let us try to execute it. So chef apply create user. Okay, so there is error. What is the error? Undefined method include recipe for the Linux user. There is spelling mistake, that is something. Include recipe include underscore recipe. This was area given. Right. This file include let me just see any documentation. So ideally this should work if we generate a cookbook and use it, but we are using chef for play. Let me see, that is the reason. Include underscore recipe chef. So this is when we have a proper directory structure, we can give this way. One of the recipe, the cookbook can have multiple recipes types. So let us say there is a cookbook 1 and it has something like recipes. This is the default directory. Recipes under that default.rb is the file where the execution of the cookbook starts. So in the same recipes directory, we can also have something like xyz.rb. This is another recipe, like abc.rb. This is another recipe, right? So let us say this is cookbook 1. This is under cookbooks directory. And let us say I have another directory called cookbooks and cookbook 2. This is a cookbook 2. And here also I have recipes and default.rb. Again, I have here something like df.rb. This is another recipe. And here I have 123.rb. Let us say 123.rb. Now, let us say I want to include abc.rb in this cookbook. Let us say in default.rb, I want to call this cookbook. So how do we call cookbook 1 : and then abc.rb. So include underscore recipe and this cookbook will try to execute this cookbook from the first cookbook. So this is the notation we use. This is actually something like a Ruby notation wherein we specify this cookbook. When cookbook 2 is getting executed, we will get the abc.rb from the previous cookbook, from cookbook 1, and it tries to execute on the cookbook 2. So that is the notation which is talking about here. 2 colons, right, from a different cookbook.
So if so, anything after double colons is gonna all that cookbook as well. Is that what you mean, right?
Right. So if there are multiple cookbooks, we can execute a recipe from one cookbook. The recipe is a kind of task. So this is a collection of recipes is called cookbooks, right?
Yeah.
So if we want to execute a particular recipe in another cookbook, what we do is include underscore recipe cookbook and colon colon that previous cookbook. So that will be executed. Okay. So anyway, Shopify doesn't work with this thing. So let us try to create a cookbook directly in the chef server itself and try to execute. Okay. So the proper way of executing it. Now let me go to the development kit and let me go to chef repo and chef generate cookbook. Let us say I'll say create user. I'll just create one cookbook and I also create another cookbook with the create group. Okay, this will take time. Okay, it has created a cookbook and also let me create another cookbook with the create user one. This will create another cookbook. The name create user one. So okay, that will anyway work include cookbook. Now let us say I don't want to use hard-coded variables like this, and I want to use my own variables defined in some other file, and I want to use those variables inside this cookbook. So how do we use that? So we have written like this, right? Something like this. I think we discussed this. So basically, we have created a user 123, and we have given a do block and end block, and we are giving UID. Let us say 1, 2, 3, 4, and we are giving GID and 1, 2, 3, something like this, and we have given a home directory /home dir, or let us say manage underscore home is true, right? And we have given some password, etc. Right, and we have given shell, etc. Right. So I don't want to hard code like this. This is my source code. I want to keep this everything inside another file, and I want to have let us say I have include recipe here, include underscore recipe, let us say group. So this will create a group, and it will also create a user. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And this user GID is equal to 1, 2, 3. So these values, I can define all of the values like this. I mean, it's like developing the cookbook with the default values. In the sense, the value we do not want to hard code in the source code. So it will just take the values from the default file, which is defined in the cookbook, and it will populate these values from the file. Now I can simply give, there is something called node user UID. Something like this we can give. So that will, when it's getting executed, it will take all these values from the parameters file, which is like where we have defined the input variables and the values, and these values will be populated when this is getting executed using chef client command, right? So this is the right way of writing a cookbook. Okay, so what is happening here? Okay, I have two cookbooks now, create user and create user one. So I'll go to create user default.rb, sorry, recipes default.rb. So this is one of the recipes. So by default, it doesn't have anything. So I'll copy the code from client, which is like create user, right? So then I'll add this code here. This code is added. Include recipe is also added. So in include recipe, what I'll do is I'll just say include recipe cookbook 1 : let us say create group. Or what we'll do is we'll actually directly call the cookbook from the same directory. Okay, first we'll see this, if this will work. So I have a cookbook created and I have added that in the recipes default.rb. So inside cookbook, let me just create user. So today create user. Under that creator I have recipes. Under that I have default.rb. So inside the same directory I'll have another thing called create group. And inside create group I'll add this code. Okay. Now let us upload this to the server and try to execute it. Okay. So my book upload create user. Sorry, it's create user 1. So actually I created in the wrong directory. It should be in cookbooks directory. So we just created a create user cookbook. Inside that I added code in the default.rb. Inside the default.rb I have added another thing, include underscore recipe. And include underscore recipe I have given create group. That create group recipe is also present in the same cookbook recipes directory. So if this is executed on a chef client node, it should also execute create group first. Then it should execute the create user cookbook. Okay, let us try that. Okay, so let this upload. So meanwhile, we will also see. So what is the command to execute any command in Ansible? Let's say I want to execute a command XYZ on the chef client, on the client. What is the module we used? There are three modules, right? To use the same thing. for the same thing.
A module minus A shell.
Slaves, Ansible slaves. There are 2 or 3 modules which we can execute. Right? We have seen that.
Shell is a command module.
Yes. So there is something called command module in Ansible, right? That will execute a particular command. And there is shell module. There is raw command module, right? So there are 3 modules. So in a similar way, chef also has a module called command. So this is something like this: execute. Then we can give XYZ or this kind of a description. XYZ. And the command is the actual command which we want to execute. Right. So let us say touch file 123 and enter. So this will actually execute this particular command on the end client. Okay. Okay. So this seems like this is uploaded. So let us try to create a run list. How do you create a run list? Client 1 and create user. Okay, so this is how we execute a command. So all the remaining modules, so they all are same, something like template. So here it is called cookbook underscore file. So in Ansible we call just file. Here we call cookbook underscore file. Template is to copy a configuration file from the server to all the clients. If you want to do some SSH configuration on all the clients, so we need to modify the SSH file, right? So that SSH file I can modify on the server itself and copy the same file and restart the SSH, right? This is for the text files. Template module is for copying the text files from source to the destination. Cookbook underscore is for copying the non-text files. So what is that it checks internally while copying template? So let us say there is a file on the server and there is a file on the client. Is it by default replaces the file from the server to client, or will it check something before modifying it on the client? So let us say there is a SSH configuration file. For the first time we modified on the server, and by default it will be copied to the client. Now next time if I execute the same cookbook, will it replace the file or not?
No, it's not going to replace.
So what is the command it is internally using to check uh, whether the file is really modified on the server? Okay, so internally it uses something called diff command that will check the differences between the two files, and if there is really any difference, then only it is going to copy the file. In the similar way, cookbook underscore file will use something called tk-sum, checksum. So unnecessarily it will not copy to the clients unless there is some modification done at the server side, right? Okay, so this is uploaded, a run list is created. Now let me go to the client and execute the command. Okay, so I'll execute chef client. Another scenario, something like, let us say I have 1,000 cookbooks, for example, and all 1,000 are uploaded to the server. Right? And now on the client, I just want to execute only one cookbook. So there is a run list created, and if I just run list for these 1,000 cookbooks is created with this client. So this client is associated with 1000 cookbooks. Now I want to run only one cookbook. That cookbook name I know. How do I execute it? So there is a command called again chef client -o recipe and the recipe name and the cookbook name. So this cookbook name we can give. So instead of executing all the cookbooks, what it will do is it will execute only that particular cookbook. So is the same error included as for recipe not found. Oh, seems like something is deprecated in this version because this was working in the previous version. Here I'm including a cookbook called active inside another cookbook called SSHCP. So when I execute this, okay, fine. So we have something called supermarket to download the cookbook, right? So I think I have to share the screen. Okay. Okay then. Yeah. Thank you. Bye bye.